I think Bitcoin price doubles overnight. This thing goes through. It's kind of like, it's like a nuclear bomb. It's sort of like, oh, so does it break the power line? It goes, yeah, it goes to 500,000 immediately, Fred. Like, that's it. Like, we're done. You know, it's like, it breaks all models. Until we're up at $1 million per Bitcoin, they should have the idea of owning one Bitcoin. You have to get to one. Like right now, that's the goal. You have to get to one Bitcoin. I don't know what you have to do to get to one Bitcoin, but you should figure out whatever it takes to get to one Bitcoin. Do whatever it takes. Sell a kidney, okay? Not kidding. Sell a kidney. You don't need, you have an extra one. Sell one of your kidneys. You might be able to get a Bitcoin for it. This is like a major opportunity, like especially young people. They don't realize how lucky they are right now. That's the right play. You will thank me later, and your one Bitcoin might be worth $1 million in 10 years. You're buying at the absolute peak of an end of, 30, 40 years of real estate boom. So you're buying at the absolute top of the market. You're tying yourself down for 30 years with a mortgage. And so what? So you can have a dinner party and say you own this house? Get those ideas out of your brain.
Today's interview is a follow-up interview with investor, entrepreneur, and mathematician Fred Krueger. Fred Krueger is the fastest growing Bitcoiner in the space, and for good reason. Fred not only has a decade of experience on Wall Street, but he's also an extremely successful entrepreneur. He has built and exited 10 different companies, with some of the exits being in the tens of millions of dollars. On top of this, Fred also has a PhD in mathematics from Stanford University. Fred is a big advocate of the Bitcoin power law model, the most accurate Bitcoin pricing model to date. It predicts that we'll see a $1 million Bitcoin by 2032, and over the next 15 years, we'll see one Bitcoin hit $4.5 million. In this interview, Fred breaks down where he thinks Bitcoin is going in 2025, an event that he thinks could see Bitcoin go to $500,000 overnight, why he thinks Bitcoin is going to smoke real estate over the next 2 decades, and finally, his updated thoughts on the Bitcoin power law model. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video where Fred breaks down why you need to get to one whole Bitcoin in 2025. If you like what Fred has to say, be sure to follow him on YouTube and Twitter. His links are the first 2 in the description. But without further ado, let's jump in with Fred Krueger. Welcome back, Fred. First of all, it's good to have you back. There's been so much that has happened in the last 6 months since we last had you on. Especially in the last month, some of the things that we've seen is Trump won in a landslide. Republicans swept pretty much everything they could. We've seen so many pro-crypto cabinet members been elected by the Trump administration already. We have the potential Bitcoin reserve on the horizon, and we've seen it cross $100,000. I wanted to ask you, over the last 6 months, has anything surprised you with what's happened? And do you think we should be higher? Do you think we should be lower? Or are we exactly where you think we would be given everything that's unfolded?
I think we're about where I thought we would be, and not appreciably higher or lower. I think the biggest surprise to me is I didn't expect MicroStrategy to be as aggressive and as successful at raising money as it has been and deploying capital into Bitcoin. So that's the big surprise to me. I really, 6 months ago, I felt like they're probably going to be an also ran, and the ETFs were going to be absolutely dominant. Like I thought it would be like 10 to 1. Like, they're lucky to get 10% of the market. They actually had more inflows than the ETFs in the month of November, which was, pretty remarkable, I think.
No, that is insane. And I want to get into, I've seen on, let's jump into it now because you've already brought up MicroStrategy. I saw on Twitter that you've recently bought back into it. And I know you have a finance background working on Wall Street. I've seen over the last month or 2 months, just as Bitcoin's been going up, there's been so much FUD surrounding MicroStrategy and the trade and what Michael Saylor is doing. Can you explain what the MicroStrategy trade, like what the benefit of it is as opposed to just buying Bitcoin straight? And any of the fears that people have of MicroStrategy potentially unwinding and being forced into a position to sell their Bitcoin, is any of that founded or is that completely unfounded?
Well, it might. I mean, we can't predict things out 4 years from now, right? And I think a lot of, MicroStrategy has there's no scenario where MicroStrategy is going to have any kind of liquidity crisis in the next 3 years. Zero. There's just none, right? They have a mountain of almost $50 billion of Bitcoin. They have $6 billion in debt. There's no scenario in which I could see. I mean, I guess if Bitcoin went down 90% tomorrow, that would be, they might have like a small problem. It wouldn't even be like a cataclysmic problem. They'd have a small problem in 3 years, right? There's no, they have a rock solid balance sheet right now for the next 3 years. Like there's just no scenario. Now, why would anybody want to own it versus Bitcoin? Okay. I would sort of say the reasons were not completely convincing to me back in March, right? I don't know, remember we talked March, April or something like that.
Around then, yeah.
Yeah. So, if you go back then, right, there was, some talk of this Bitcoin development company that they were planning on doing. It was very vague. We're a Bitcoin development company. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. You're going to develop apps for Bitcoin. You're going to develop an exchange. That's very unclear, right? And, you're placing a lot of faith in kind of Michael Saylor, it's the jockey. You're betting on the jockey, right? You're not betting on the horse. You're just saying this jockey is he's gonna win the race somehow, right? And I think now, and really, I would say in November, we have some real evidence that they can do something different. So what did they do in November? They deployed $16 billion worth of capital. Okay. And they did it, and they increased the amount of Bitcoin per share of MicroStrategy by 40% in like 30 days, right? And so, if you think about it, they increased the amount of Bitcoin that they had by 60%. They increased the amount of shares by 20%. The difference is that 40% is the yield of their Bitcoin, right? But, the fact that they were able to materially increase the amount of Bitcoins per share in a short period of time tells me that if all things remain equal, right? Like if we don't believe that the multiple is going to contract and we don't believe Bitcoin is going to crash, there should be another yield event where they're going to create more yield per share. And if the multiplier just stays at 2.5, price is going to go up relative to Bitcoin. It's a yield. It's a carry trade. You've heard about this yen carry trade. This is a much bigger carry trade. This is like a 30% per year carry trade. Now, again, I view it as a trade. I don't view it as like I'm getting married to MicroStrategy. I do sort of see a scenario, a year from now, 2 years from now, I don't know whenever we get into a bear market, I think that multiple could collapse, right? But
Sorry to interrupt, but let me
Yeah.
sort of break this down for the layman, and how I understand it. The benefit of owning MicroStrategy shares over holding Bitcoin is you don't only get the value accretion as Bitcoin goes up through the shares of MicroStrategy, but by the way Michael Saylor is constructing this capital raising and buying more, you're also gaining additional Bitcoin per shares that you own. So and is this why it trades at a 2.5x NAV as well?
I think so. Look, I think it traded there before just on the hope of that he will do something, right?
Yeah,
It
okay.
traded up to 2, right? Like there was a sort of premium. Again, there's a sort of like I'm betting on Saylor, right? Now, I think he's kind of delivered on kind of he's delivered the goods, that, I was a little skeptical, and I bought some in April, I bought some call options. It's like, I can't not bet on this guy. You know what I mean? Like I gotta get some. No, I made a fortune on those call options, right? Because I timed the move really well, right? And, and so I took my profit, and then I was sort of out of the market for 2.5 weeks. And then, but during those weeks, I got a chance to really kind of crunch through the numbers of what happened in November. I'm like, holy cow. Like actually November was a really amazing month for the company, you know, and, I'm like, I get it. I think this company for the next 6 months deserves, you should own Bitcoin. Yeah. MicroStrategy. You should, you don't, you don't want to not participate in this, for the bull market phase, right? Because I'm not even expecting the multiple to go up. You see, I'm just saying multiple stays exactly where it is. I'm perfectly happy, right? I'm going to outperform Bitcoin by maybe 20-30%, which is like, okay, I'll take that, right? So, if I was more negative on Bitcoin, I would say, yeah, I'm going to be more defensive. I'm just going to get into Bitcoin. But as if I'm constructive on Bitcoin for the next year, and I don't mind owning a little bit of MSTR along with my Bitcoin. So,
Yeah, okay, that all makes
no,
sense.
to be in full transparency, it's a relatively small position relative to the amount of Bitcoin that I have. So I'm really long a lot of Bitcoin, and I'm long a little bit of MSTR now too. And
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
enjoying. I'm gonna enjoy being back on Team Sailor. A little
Yeah.
bit, but
I mean, it's so
if
cool.
if somebody completely new is coming in, I still think Bitcoin's a better trade for them. If they're coming in, I think to me it's a little bit of it's like topping on an ice cream sundae. The main thing is the ice cream, and you put a little bit of the chocolate syrup on the ice cream and the sprinkles. But the main thing is the ice cream.
Yeah.
So I think if you're in Bitcoin, please actually own actual Bitcoin. There's a lot of reasons why you should own actual Bitcoin, not somebody's shares of somebody managing Bitcoin for you or anything else. Now, once you got a decent position in actual Bitcoin, yeah, maybe, experiment with ETFs or ETF options or MicroStrategy or whatever tickles your fancy. But, it's kind of my view.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense for owning it, and it's cool. I mean, you've been in the space for multiple cycles and seen the come up of Michael Saylor, and Bitcoiners and people that have been in the space and watched it unfold. Like, this isn't news to us, but it's super entertaining seeing it break traditional finance people's brains and seeing them have meltdowns over what Saylor is doing, and the speed of which he's able to raise money. Jason being one of those people, it's so entertaining to watch play out. And yeah,
The thing with these hyper successful guys like Jason, right? The issue is, they've been very successful at kind of the fiat game, right? And the startup game, right? And so, having been in that situation myself and having a lot of friends there, um, I can tell you it's a really big ask to go to somebody who's done well and, who's all set for life in this one, in one game, and then say, by the way, you should take half of what you have and you should put it in these like digital coins. Like, most people are like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, I'm a real estate developer in Australia. Like, I'm super successful, right? You're telling me to sell half my properties and buy Bitcoin with it. And you're like, "Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great idea." They're like, "Absolutely not. What are you, crazy?" You know? So, I almost think there's something, I call it Krueger's law, which is the more successful you are in fiat, the more you're gonna resist jumping
that's
over to Bitcoin.
so true. That's so true. Like people like
And you
Warren
find you
Buffett.
find that, like, people who are more into it are more like students, construction workers, anybody who doesn't have that much to lose. They're like, here's the deal. It's 21 million coins, it's immutable, it's taken on, has this great track record. They're like, what am I missing? This thing is great. I love it. Sign
So
me up.
true.
But if you get a guy like Jason that's like, you know, sitting on top of the world, for him to like make that pivot is extremely difficult. And really there's two problems with it, right? Problem number one, if he doesn't do it, right? If he which he probably won't, right? He probably is not going to sell 50% of his fiat and buy Bitcoin, right? If he doesn't do it and Bitcoin continues to do what it's been doing over the next 10 years, he's no longer going to be so significant. He's still going to be rich, but you know what? Like at the dinner party, they're going to be talking to, some other guy, who basically like, yeah, I've been, I did this. I sold a company. I sold a business, sold a house. I put it all in Bitcoin in 2024. And now it's worth, 2 million a coin, right? Everybody will be like, that guy's the guy I want to talk to. Jason, okay, yeah, you invested in Uber 15 years ago. And it's like, whatever. You're not really that interesting. And by the way, Uber is now replaced with Tesla Autopilot. So nobody cares. You know what I mean? So, I feel like, so that's one risk. The first risk is he won't be at the top of the heap if Bitcoin keeps doing what it's going to do. On the other hand, if he does put half of it into Bitcoin, what if Fred and all these other guys are wrong? What if this is just a complete Ponzi scheme? Well, then he's lost half of his money. So either way, he's completely, he went from being super secure to having two situations which are both really dangerous, right?
True.
There's no good way to, there's no good. So, what he can do is just put in like 2% of his money into Bitcoin. But even then, he's going to be obsolete relative to the guy who's put 100% in Bitcoin. That 2% is not going to save him. So the ultra rich who really have an existential problem, they will not be at the top of the heap unless they go max Bitcoin. That's the only way they're going to stay at the absolute top.
True.
And
Jason,
Michael Saylor is about, I think he's probably going to end up, kind of being the next Elon Musk. Look, Elon, if you go back to 2018, right? Or right around there, even before 2015, 16, Elon was in trouble, right? Tesla, was sort of struggling, couldn't get financing. It had to get bailed out by the government, all this stuff, right? Like SpaceX was, on a bunch of failed launches and stuff. So, in a decade, Elon went from kind of this struggling kind of startup guy to the richest guy in the world. Now, what happens to Saylor in the next decade? I don't know. Could be the next, he'll be the next Jamie Dimon, probably before 10 years, but you know what I mean?
true.
So I think things can change pretty good. And, if you're at that top of the pecking order, the only thing that matters is how many people are above you, right?
True. Very good point. Jason's an interesting case because he's so close friends with Chamath. Like he does a podcast with Chamath and David Sachs, and it seems like they have a much better, I don't know if understanding's the right word, but like Chamath recently went off on an All-In podcast and he said he regrets every time he sold Bitcoin. At one point, him and friends owned 5% of the supply. And if he had to go back, like his biggest regret is selling Bitcoin. And he's so close to these people that it seem to intimately get it, but he's doubling down on going anti-Michael Saylor and essentially calling it a Ponzi scheme and that it's going to collapse. So yeah, Jason is a very interesting case.
None of them, I don't think any of the four of them have any meaningful percentage of their net worth in Bitcoin.
You don't think Chamath even?
No, I'd say not a meaningful percentage of their net worth.
Okay.
Does Chamath have 10% of his net worth
True.
in Bitcoin?
I doubt it.
I really doubt it. You know what I mean? I think certainly he did at one point, but
True.
he sold it. He diversified. So, again, these are guys who they've got a toehold, for you or me, their position's enormous, right? But,
True. On this topic, I remember it's bringing up a memory, but I think you went to the All-In conference earlier this year. And I remember that was a few months ago, you made a video talking about no one is paying attention, essentially. Like, you were speaking to people about the Bitcoin trade, and this was before the huge run up.
Yeah.
And I assume the people that attend this conference are extremely successful VCs, startup guys, tech guys. Can you speak a bit to your experience there and how really no one was talking about Bitcoin and what was about to unfold? And you sort of feel vindicated that it's a few months later, it's gone up 100%. And a lot of these super successful guys who you would assume are extremely intelligent have just completely missed this.
Yeah, I mean, it was completely not on anybody's radar. There's like one guy that I met at the Bitcoin Nashville conference, and he follows me on Twitter, so he'll know who I'm talking about, Indian chap. Anyways, but he was like, yeah, Fred, no, I totally am in. I'm in this Bitcoin thing. It's like great, but like everybody else I'd be talking about, they'd be totally uninterested. Like crypto, what? Nah, no. Yeah, I used to own Solana, but I sold it, like that. It was like no. At all. I talked to Jason a bit there, like, yeah, he was like, not interested. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. Uh, it was not on anybody's radar. And look, I even think at Bitcoin 100,000, it's really not on people's radar. It's just like, people sort of view it as like, so okay, I've seen this play before. Like Sam Bankman-Fried, it'll be over. Like the narrative right now in Silicon Valley is everything is AI, right? AI is the interesting thing. Bitcoin is a completely uninteresting thing. It's some kind of a Ponzi scheme, whatever. But if you're smart, you're in AI, So, well, I understand the thinking. I mean, AI certainly is fascinating and interesting. I think that, however, as an investment, I think they're going to be wrong. I think, even you know, uh, like Microsoft, okay, clearly, absolutely in top of the game in AI, right? They're a big investor in OpenAI. They're betting the ranch on AI, right? But look, you look at Microsoft earnings per share in Bitcoin terms, they're not doing so great. It's constant. So, I think that the reality is, as an investment, um, Bitcoin is a better investment. I think AI will change the world in terms of the way we live and work much more than Bitcoin will. Bitcoin is just it's sort of going to be the plumbing behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and and so, if you're looking for a new Chat GPT experience with Bitcoin, that's not happening, but nobody cares. Bitcoin is very important to focus on what Bitcoin is and how it's used in the day to day. It's mainly used as a saving vehicle, right? And so you do whatever you do in life, you accumulate Bitcoin, and, occasionally you'll, buy something with it, like once every couple years, That's kind of tends to be the behavioral pattern with Bitcoin. So I just don't see, people expecting, well, it's not used for gaming. Well, sure it's not. Like, look, I have a 17-year-old, he's a gamer. He plays Fortnite all the time, and, they have their own currency in Fortnite, V-Bucks, you know, and it works just fine. If you're like in that world, V-Bucks, that's great, you don't need Bitcoin. So it's not like, well, Bitcoin's too slow to be used in Fortnite. Doesn't matter. Like, it's, that's not the point, It's sort of like saying, I don't know. I don't have an analogy for it, but it's completely irrelevant to the fact that it's not in the day-to-day payment mechanism. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter because it really is. It's much more close to. Um, it's not even digital gold. It's something completely new that humans have never had such a thing. Which is a neutral way to save your money. and that has promises very good long-term appreciation and allows you to save it it's completely new to humans. So any analogy is always flawed. Digital gold is flawed because gold, that whole thing is like we're trying to make an analogy. It's not that. It's not digital energy. It's none of the thing. It's something completely new. It's trying to explain like what an airplane was to somebody before Wilbur Wright. Like men fly. No, that doesn't seem very possible. We have a currency that you can send anywhere in the world and you can hold it yourself. There's even quantum computers probably can't even break it. Like how's that possible? Well, it is. It's just, it's something new that I didn't think it was possible like 20 years ago. I didn't think digital currency, we had these things. We had like flues. I don't know if you remember that. Whoopi Goldberg she was the spokesperson for this thing. We
Oh,
had something
okay.
called beans. This is in the 90s, right? We had something called beans.
Okay.
There was these point-like cryptocurrencies, right? And basically you go, you use your credit card, you buy some beans. Then you can buy stuff with these beans, right? So, but they're all managed on some database
Yep.
somewhere, it kind of got hacked by some Russian,
Yeah, right.
group.
Okay.
So it didn't work. Like it wasn't sufficiently decentralized. It wasn't hard enough, you
Yep.
know.
And I think you bring up a good point that it's completely new. And I think this is why it breaks so many people's brains, is because it is such a new paradigm. And another point you brought up is that I 100% agree that AI is probably going to be more transformational because like it can be integrated into so many different verticals and so many different aspects of life. But it's how do you get exposure? Like the everyday person, the everyday layman isn't going to be able to invest in the correct startups and businesses and get the same value accrual that
It's
is
very hard to predict. Like if you had to try to predict the internet, you would have bought Cisco systems. Okay.
100%. Yeah, great example.
That was the stock everybody wanted to own in 1999, right? Because they were like, Fred, you don't want to invest in the companies that people use. You want to invest in the picks and the shovels. And right now they're saying the same thing about Nvidia. Is Nvidia the right stock? I don't know. Maybe not. Like, maybe it's going to be Tesla. I don't know. I don't know where AI is going to be used. I don't know how it's going to be used. I don't know who's going to, is it a winner take all thing, or is it the guy with the biggest data center who wins? I don't know, So,
Whereas Bitcoin is a much more straightforward. We know like it's the winner. It's very clear that it's a winner now, and anyone can buy it and get that value accrual. So, um, I want to jump into what how you see the market playing out because I've seen you predict that Bitcoin can go as high as $500,000 next year. I know you're a big advocate of the power law model. Pretty sure from memory that says in 2025 we peak somewhere between 200 and 250,000. So I'd love to get your prediction or sort of outlook of how you see the last month of 2024 playing out and what you think 2025 looks like, where you think we might
well, look,
peak out.
the power law makes very general statements that has almost no predictive ability for a 1 year forward. It really has none, right? What the power law tells you is, I'll tell you a relative range 10 years out, right? So it says 5 to 10 years out, it has predictive capability. 1 year out has almost none. Like it tells you, well, on the low end, we're probably going to be above 40,000. And on the high end, we could be as high as 500,000. Now, people are like, what kind of value is that? Nothing, right? And it does sound crazy. Like, why are we even like listening to something which has that kind of range, right? Now, if you go 10 years out, it does say something very specific. It says, we're probably going to be above 300,000 and we're probably going to be below 3 million. Now, that still sounds pretty wide, but it's not that wide. First of all, it says on the low end, we're going to be above 300,000. Well, that's probably an asset that I want to own, right? If we're going to make you're telling me we're going to go 3x in 10 years. I kind of want to own that asset. Like my house, I don't think my house is going to go up 3x in 10 years. You know what I mean? So an asset that goes up 3x in 10 years is pretty good. It's a good asset to own. That's the worst case, right? On the upside, it says you're going to go up to 300,000 in 10 years, 3 million in 10 years. Well, if that happens, I'm the happiest guy on the planet also, right? So I think the power law has really good predictive strength for long periods. It just doesn't tell you a lot for the next year. And, and how high it can go up, it really doesn't tell you that much either. Like, because what we've seen in there's these sigmas, right? So we can sort of say it's going to, doubling would be 1 sigma, if it goes up 4x, that's 2 sigma, right? So like a 2 sigma event would be it going up from the trend line, which will be a little bit higher than 100,000 by the end of next year. It would say maybe 125,000. The 2 sigma event would be 500,000.
Okay.
Now, do we know that, we've had 2 sigma events, like 2017 was a 2 sigma event, right?
Okay. Was 21 a 2 sigma event?
It's 2017 was a little higher than 2. It was like
Okay.
2.5. So the 2020, and so, we don't know, and we've only had like these peaks. We've had 3 of them, so you're trying to draw a line through 3 numbers, and you're like, oh, I driven this line that connects the peak of 2013, 2017, and 2021. Okay. And now I want to make another, those things have all come down, but those 3 numbers, there's 2 intervals between those 3. So it's 2013 to 2020. That's 1 interval. 2020 to 2013 to 2017, 2017 to 2020. Is that enough information to talk about what the next interval is going to be? I don't think so, personally. Everybody's, the Giovannis of the world will be like, absolutely, it's going down. Now it's only going to go to 200,000 max. I'm like, that's not what the power law says. That's what, Giovanni's read of the tea leaves says, And so, like I'm not a fortune teller, and I don't believe in tea leaves and astrology and, all these things. So, my view is it does appear that, over time, this thing is a power law. It does appear that way. It does appear that in 10 years, Bitcoin's probably going to hit somewhere close to 1 million, in 10 years. But wide range around that million, right? It could be as low as 500,000, right? But it's pretty good bet, right? Like long term over 10 years is a really good bet. I don't think you're going to find another asset that's going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm very bullish on that, and I think the power law should give you a lot of comfort on that. Now, I think there's a temptation to like look at these numbers and try to see if I can figure out what's going to happen next month. And I think the power law tells you nothing about what's going to happen next month. 0, right? So you should look elsewhere for that. What do I think is going to happen next month? I think we're going to go up in the month of December, this month. I think we're going to close the year higher than we are now. I don't think it has anything to do with the power law. I think it has to do with Michael Saylor buying more Bitcoin. And I think the trends right now are Michael Saylor buying Bitcoin and TradFi kind of waking up to the fact that it hit 100,000, and, what I keep on going back to is this analysis of, you got all the money in the world, this TradFi world, right? And, we're talking several $100 trillion, conservatively several $100 trillion, right? That's in, let's just say mainly stocks and bonds, right? Mainly, right? And, what Michael Saylor says, we have $200 trillion of dead money. And he's about right. I mean, yeah, there's some money in, FANG, but it's not 100 trillion, in FANG. Most of the money in the world is like sitting in some crappy office complex in Sydney, right? That's you want to picture where the money is. Just picture a rundown shopping mall outside of Sydney with a broken gas station, and that guy running it, and they're trying to make 5% a year. Like that's where most of the money in the world is, right? And you got some rich guy, a retired guy who owns that gas station, right? And he's like, "Damn, I made 6% last year. I'm only going to make 5% this year." Whatever, right? It's like dumb money, and this money can't even compete with the money printing, right? So like, you got all this like really bad investment right now, and then you got people buying government bonds because their charter says that they have to buy government bonds. So it's just insanity, right? Or you've got pension funds, like we have these three things that are on the, and then governments are printing money at like 10% plus per year and going up. It's just like, it may not be going up today, but it's going up. Everybody's printing more money. They come up with new plans every time. The state of New York decided they want to print billions of dollars and hand it over to people to fight inflation. Like, it's incredible. They're going to try to fight inflation by printing money. So you've got this kind of nutty kind of behavior, and people are like, "Yeah, great idea, yeah, but I'm suffering from inflation, so I really could use some handouts." That won't create inflation again. No, not at all. So you have the blind leading the blind on this kind of front, and and meanwhile, you have some people who are buying Bitcoin. But there's more and more people every year that are realizing that they're in the wrong trade. And this trade, you know, it should happen all at once. Everybody should kind of realize that Bitcoin, but it doesn't. It doesn't. There's a progression of human stupidity, right? And it'll take 20 years for everybody to realize they were all in the wrong trade. I know it. I know all these people. And you know them too. They're taking a long time to come to this realization. And so the power law is basically a way of measuring human stupidity, right? And it says that basically it's like 40, we're getting 40%, then it's going to 30, but then people are getting smarter. So, the rate we're having diminishing returns on Bitcoin, but it's still going to be really good for a long time. And then, 20 years from now, everybody will be like, how the hell did I miss this thing? But you miss it one day at a time, How the hell did you miss investing in Apple? I don't know. I missed investing in Apple because I owned Apple in 2007. But then I sold it stupidly, and I just got out of the trade, and it went up 50 times after that. Like, I'm an idiot. What can I tell you? And so I think with Bitcoin, don't be an idiot. We're on this multi-generation, we're like a multi-decade trade. All you need to do is do nothing. That's what you need to do. To do absolutely nothing. Treat it like a savings account and start thinking in Bitcoin. Just start thinking. Don't think in terms of how much your Bitcoin's worth. You can think about it a little bit, but don't do anything with it. Like, don't go spend it on, hookers and blow.
Which is a temptation.
Exactly. Or houses or Lambos.
Yeah, we'll try not to do that.
Let's leave the Lambos to the crypto guys, Because I have a friend who's in Miami. He goes, "Yeah, Fred, there's all these Lambos here." And I go, "Well," he goes, "It's very hard to distinguish." He goes, "There's some guys who are whales here and the other ones." I go, "Let me guess. The only way you can differentiate between the whales and the non-whales is the whales have Lambos." He goes, "That's right." So you need this like distinguishing characteristic, it's like you need the Lambo so that they can, but other than that, they're exactly the same creature. But like Bitcoiners were different. I think at this time around, we're different. Like in 2017, we resembled the crypto people. We had Lambos and all the rest.
True. I do think there is a rift opening. One Okay, you said the power law, you personally think we're higher over the next month. What do you think in 2025? I've seen you throw out 500,000 potentially. Do you want to put
Yeah,
a number on what you
I
think we
definitely
see?
think, look, I think that my back of the envelope calculation, it's almost has nothing to do with the power law. It's just the multiplier. Look, I think MicroStrategy did about $30 billion this year, right? Total in inflows. Maybe, no, sorry, maybe 20, maybe almost 30, 20, somewhere between 20 and 30, right?
Is that
The
the same as the
ETF,
ETFs? Yeah, sorry.
the ETFs did a little bit more, maybe total, but like they're almost comparable, right? So, people are like, how much? So we've had $60 billion, let's just call it, right? That went from institutional money or like institutional retail, but like TradFi, there's been a $60 billion movement into or let's say a $50 billion movement into Bitcoin, right? What did that do to Bitcoin? Well, it moved it up from, let's call it 40,000 to 100,000, right? Okay. Let's just say even it moved it from 50,000, doubled it, right? Okay. So it created $1 trillion of market cap with $50 billion in there. That's a 20x multiple, right? So let's just use 20x. I think that's probably a pretty decent multiple on like how much money's coming into the combo of ETFs and MicroStrategy, right? Well, what do I think MicroStrategy is going to do next year? I think they could probably do 75 billion, what do I think the ETFs? I think the ETFs will do more now, right? I think they'll probably do 150 billion. They're sort of getting going, like I feel like the Black Rocks of the world, they're just starting, the advisors, all that stuff. So I think if you look at this and you say, okay, Brad, what do you think the total number is between, I'd say 250 billion, maybe 200 billion, between those two. So what does that do to the market? Well, I think it gets you to around 400, thousand per Bitcoin, Now, of course, that rosy scenario may not play out, but I think that, that's seems reasonable to me. And that doesn't even involve Bitcoin National Reserve or, any of that stuff, right? It's just TradFi and MicroStrategies doing their thing, you know.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
So,
sense.
no, look, I don't know. I think there's a wide variety of things, but I'd be kind of shocked if we were below 200,000 next year, at the end of next year. That would kind of shock me if we were below 200,000. Something's wrong with my thesis because I do think we're going to double from here in the next year. I mean, look, we did it better than that this year. We did more than double, right? I think we'll triple or quadruple or maybe even more. It's possible. There's not. I do think that right now, it's a supply and demand thing, right? So where's the supply coming from? The supply is coming from OGs selling mainly. It's not miners don't matter anymore, right? So you have the supply is OGs selling. Well, I think a lot of the OGs are got out right around 100K. I think that was a lot of them kind of there. I think the next tranche of stuff, I think you're going to have people peel away parts, but I don't think they're going to get out entirely. Just talking to people I know and, my experience, I don't see people saying I'm out at 200K. I'm out. Like, I don't meet people like that. I don't know. Maybe you do, but I don't, you know what I mean? I don't see people like that. I see people saying at 200K, I might take off 10% or 20%. You know what I mean? And I might do that myself, by the way. Only reason to do that for me is I kind of believe in this Kelly criterion a little bit. I think that as a discipline, it's good to say, I'm going to have some maximum threshold, beyond which I don't want to be in Bitcoin, right?
Can you
So,
break this? I've seen you tweet about this. Can you break this Kelly criterion down? Is it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what it is, let's assume you're going to go to the casino and let's just say you're flipping coins, right? And you have you know, uh, an advantage. So you have 65% heads, right? Or 60% heads, 40% 60% of the time it's going to be heads, 40% tails, and you're going to win. You're going to win $1 either way. You're going to win $1 or lose $1, right? That's one way to look at it. Or you could take the other way of looking at it, which is say you have even chance, but you win twice as much as you win. If you flip a coin, if it's heads, you win $2. If it's tails, you lose $1. How much do you bet each time, right? Like, what is the best betting strategy in this game? Well, you could say I'm going to place it all on a single roll. Well, that's not that great because you have one chance in 2 to lose everything. You're not going to place it all, right? So then the question is, maybe I should place 1% of my money on each roll. Well, maybe that's not the right thing, So you can convince yourself pretty easily that it should be a percentage of your bankroll that you should bet on every time. Well, what percent, right? What percent of your bankroll? And so the Kelly criterion basically establishes a formula for that, which in the case of Bitcoin can be the sort of continuous version of that is, what do I expect the amount of gain to be next year divided by the volatility I expect. Well, volatility, we know roughly what it is, about 80%. What it is, right? So and I think that's reasonable to think that that's going to continue, right? The standard deviation is about 80%, which means that the volatility is square of that. So it turns out to be 64%. So now, if you think you're going to make more than 64% next year, right, every year, it says the Kelly criterion said you should be 100%. But if you think it's going to be like, even though you're super excited, but you think, okay, power law says 45% is kind of what I should expect, then you should be at 45% divided by 64%, which is about 70%, right? So there's a lot of variables in this. It's not like it's like super easy one answer. Like you can come up with the Kelly criterion. It'll tell you different things depending on how you apply it. But in general, I think what the Kelly criterion is about is sort of a rebalancing thing. It's sort of saying, I'm going to keep a certain percentage of my net worth. And you back away from it. And you can sort of say, what if I said, I'm going to keep 80% of my net worth in Bitcoin at all times for the next 10 years? Well, it's a super easy way to implement your strategy, because you put 80% in Bitcoin. Let's say Bitcoin does really well. It doubles. Well, now you have 90% in Bitcoin. So great. You sell 10%. Now you have 80% in Bitcoin now. You see what I'm saying? And also that gives you firepower. Now it goes down. Now Bitcoin has a down year. Now you have 20% that you can borrow money. You can put money to work and buy more Bitcoin. If you're 100% in, you can't buy the dip. There's no dip to buy. There's no money to buy the dip with, right? So all this it's different for if you're using it as a savings account and you got a stream of income coming in. That's one thing, right? And it's more like if you're an old retired guy like me, it's different because now we have to look at more of the Kelly criterion, right? So I think if you're working and if you're young, my recommendation is 100% in Bitcoin. That's it. Stop. Don't even think. Just keep on adding, right?
Okay.
If you're over 50 and you're kind of into your glory days or whatever they call it, the twilight years, if you're looking at the home stretch, right? Then I think keeping something below 70% is probably 70% might be the right number. If you're aggressive, maybe 80%. But you also, it gives you a little bit of buffer for some unexpected thing comes cash needs. You get in an accident, you get sued, something happens, right? Well, you don't have to sell your Bitcoin for that. You can now sell your fiat, So I think there's a lot of reasons why I think that's probably a good strategy.
True.
And then you sleep. I think you also mentally, you sleep a little bit better,
That's a good point. The something you brought up and you would be familiar with as everyone in Bitcoin and crypto is the 4-year cycle and historically 2025 is going to be that big parabolic year. I wanted to ask your thoughts on sort of a two-pronged question. Do you think we see a very harsh bear market in 2026 like a lot of people are expecting? And sort of the general consensus I get from people is that they're going to try and time their sellout to be towards the end of 2025 and make their exit. You said you would consider selling if Bitcoin got to 200,000. Do you approach it more from a, if Bitcoin hits this price, then I'll peel off a certain amount and sell? Or do you
Yeah.
approach it a
Like I
time-based
think that
approach? Yeah.
I think there's a lot of danger in assuming this 4-year cycle is going to persist. I really do. I think that, like, again, you go back to, you have 3 numbers, okay? And when I say cycle, let's talk about bear markets, right? So you have 2014, 2018, and 2022. And again, you have 3 data points and you have 2 intervals. Now you're saying the next interval is like the third out of interval. The third in a series is going to be a continuation of those 2. I don't know, like, and it's going to happen exactly in 4 years. Okay. There is a mining cycle. Sure. There's a halving. That doesn't play that much of a role anymore. So I don't see a lot of reasons why I would believe that will cause the timing. Now, people say, well, because people think it's going to happen, therefore it will happen. Maybe partly, but I got to tell you, these TradFi guys don't even know what a 4-year cycle is. I have no idea. Like, you're telling them, well, yeah, 4-year halving. They don't, like, what? What are you talking about? Halving? What? Like, I bought IBIT. What are you talking about? There's a halving in IBIT. They're doing a stock split. What's happening? Like, they don't know. Like, so like, we've got a completely different world, and then it's like, wait a second, there's a halving. Yeah, by the way, there's only 5% left to mine. Only 1% is going to be mined next year, and that's going to go down. Well, how is that supposed to impact price? It's not going to impact price very much at all. Like, it won't. Like, logically, it will not impact price at all, right? MicroStrategy just bought $16 billion worth of Bitcoin in a month. Like, halving doesn't matter. Like, it matters, like, what some Saudi prince will do, what Apple will do, what the U.S. government will do. That's what matters. Halving doesn't matter anymore. So, look, I think it's stupid to think about halvings right now. I don't think that's very relevant for mining. I think it's stupid to be in mining. I think miners are a bad investment, but, like, that's, whatever. Like, that's the legacy. I wouldn't invest in a miner if you paid me. But I think that bear markets, I think, will happen. But I don't think, there's a really interesting saying that Alan Greenspan said. So one of the characteristics of bear markets is you can't predict them. When you really get a real bear market, it's when every single person is completely convinced that the bear market will never happen. And that's when you get a bear market. And you saw that, I've seen that 3 times in my life where it's, where in the .com world, everybody's like, internet changes everything. Everybody has to be a .com. We all need to get jobs in .com. Like, 100% of the people were into .com. Okay. Then in 2007 and 2008, every single person wanted to be in real estate. Every friend, everybody's buying real estate. I'm sure in Australia, like, there's Manly Beach, we got to get, like, this
Yep.
cottage, like, buy this, but everybody, 100% were into it. Right. And, and earlier in my career, I saw the Japanese bubble of the 80s. It was like, you went to Japan, 100% of the people like, yeah, Japan's going to be the number 1 world power. We're going to make everything. U.S. is dead. Blah, blah. So you have to get to that beat where every single person believes something, and then we're ripe for somebody saying, wait a second, Japan's actually not going to be the world power anymore. Ooh, okay. Or, I'm sorry, these houses, they're all owned by, strippers and brokers, like in The Big Short, like, oh yeah, we're in a bubble, like the great scene where he's like, Are we in we're in a bubble. We're in a bubble. Sell everything. Yeah. And I think right now you look at, is Bitcoin a bubble? No. Like you go out and nobody thinks it's even like, nobody's involved. Nobody's even talking about it. Bitcoin is not a bubble. Yeah. Bitcoin's not a bubble because, it's like 99% of everybody thinks it's complete Ponzi scheme and they shouldn't invest. And you turn on CNBC and it's like, Bitcoin is up. Let's talk about the bubble and let's talk about why we shouldn't invest in Bitcoin. We need to keep with the gold bars that are in Fort Knox. Let's absolutely not sell those gold bars and buy Bitcoin. That would be an irresponsible idea. So yeah, that's the mainstream opinion, right? It's not that so we're so far from like everybody and their brother buying Bitcoin. They don't care. We're very, very far away from that. I'm sure, real estate in Australia, it's like everything's about real estate, right?
Oh, dude, don't get me started on it. Yeah, this is one of the
I mean,
topics.
I watched like some broker. They had this like TV show with like these brokers in Australia. And they're
I
like,
know what you're
this
talking
is
about.
a prime, nice, it's like, it's an okay house. How much? 20 million, like, well, does it have a view? No, it doesn't have a view, but it's close to the beach. Like, what the hell?
Dude, yeah,
You feel like telling these guys, why don't you take your 20 million, okay, and buy 200 Bitcoin? Yeah, what, how about that?
bro, good
Yeah,
luck convincing anyone of that in Australia. I want to jump into this because there's a tweet I want to read out that you did a few days ago, and I loved it because me and my friend sat down when we really got into Bitcoin in 21 and we crunched the numbers because we were at the age where a lot of our friends, they're buying their first house. And I don't know what it's like in the States, but there's a huge culture around investing in real estate and getting your first house. It's
Mhm.
so much of the Australian economy and zeitgeist is built around owning real estate. And so much of the economy is propped up by it.
Oh.
Everyone is real estate crazy. And my sister's about to buy a house, and I've been trying my best to convince them. You tweeted out that real estate is going to severely underperform Bitcoin over the next 2 decades. It won't even be close. Smart people will rent their entire life. The idea of buying a house will be for losers. I would love for you to help me convince my friends and my sister about how bad of a trade um, getting a house and the
Very,
premium that they command
okay.
versus Bitcoin.
So does your sister expect to live another 20 years?
I would assume, yes, she would.
Right. Okay. Right. So let's take a 20-year horizon. Okay. Okay. She buys a house right now. How much is a house is she going to buy? What kind of,
The median house price in Australia is $1 million.
okay. So let's just say a million Aussie, right?
Yep.
Okay. She's going to spend a million Aussie on a house. Okay. How much is that house going to be worth 20 years from now? Best case.
Historically, they go up 7% a year. So best case in 20 years, it'd be worth 2 mil, 2.5. But I don't think they go up at the same rate they've been going up.
Okay. So I mean, let's say it doubles, right? 2.5, like double. Let's say it triples. We're worth 3 million, right? Okay, great. What do we think Bitcoin's going to be in 20 years?
Millions.
No, it's going to be worth 10 million. It's going to be 100x from here. Okay. It's going to be 100x. Okay. And now you're going to make 100x just by putting your thing in your ledger and just waiting 20 years. Now, with the house, you're going to put it in, you're going to have house repairs, you're going to have real estate taxes. Okay. You're going to have tenant issues. You might have like floods. You could have fires, There's a fire going on here in Malibu right now. Okay. Houses are burning now. Like great Malibu, great place. Your house, you spot a house burning down. We had a guy in here yesterday. Guys, like I could see the smoke from my house. Okay. So you got that to take into account. So you got all that. And you know what? Are we going to be more mobile or less mobile in our lives in the next decades?
More mobile.
More mobile, right? Your sister may decide she doesn't even want to live in Australia. She may want to decide to go to Thailand, right? Or Venezuela, right? Which might become the new hotbed, or Argentina, like we're going to be moving all around, and you can work now from anywhere, right? You can do work literally from anywhere. You know, you're where you are in Australia may turn into a hellhole. Great. You wanted to buy on Market Street in San Francisco? You buy a house. Great address. Great. Now you have to deal with a homeless guy defecating right in front of your house every day. Like, that's your new reality. That's David Sachs's reality. Okay. Okay. He buys these houses. Like he's got to deal with these homeless guys. Like, like it doesn't matter. Like, you know, he's the internet czar, and now he has to deal with these homeless guys. It doesn't matter because he lives in San Francisco, right? So I think it's just like it's a losing trade on every single element of it is a losing trade. And you're buying at the absolute peak of an end of, 30, 40 years of real estate boom. So you're buying at the absolute top of the market. Okay. You're tying yourself down for 30 years with a mortgage. And so what? So you can have a dinner party and say you own this house? Right. I mean, that's pretty much it, right? It's just like your social signaling is like, and, I would say you need to get those ideas out of your brain and get into an idea that it's how much you have in your ledger that counts, not how much house you have. You're sitting there in a crappy house, and they are crappy. They're not even great.
They are terrible.
They're all, what do they call them? Dog boxes or whatever.
Yep.
Like
Dog boxes. That's what they call them.
dog boxes. Like they're junky things. You're sitting there going, it's great, and objectively, it's not great.
100%. There's
Yeah.
two tailwinds that property and housing, at least in Australia, and I imagine the US is the exact same thing, has had over the last 30, 40 years that real estate has essentially just gone straight up. And that is population growth and immigration. And if you extrapolate that out over the next few decades, these aren't massive drivers of growth for real estate anymore either. I know with Trump being elected, he's really cracking down on immigration. I know it's a huge issue in Australia, and they're really turning sour on immigration. So this huge wave of demand that historically has been a
Well,
driver.
the other thing is work at home, right?
Yes, true as well.
Right. So whenever look, how many times do you need to go to downtown Sydney to do something anymore? You don't need to. You can do everything. You get your food delivered from Amazon. It doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
Like you can live anywhere you want. Now, the only thing you need is friends, right? That's it. If you can, but look, you can live in some remote beach community somewhere, and you make friends.
Yep. Yep.
People will find. It's sort of like New York, smart artists and all these cool people in the 60s lived in Soho, but it was super cheap. Nobody wanted to live in Soho, right? Then it became like super expensive. Now it's just like, Chanel and, whatever, Louis Vuitton, and you know what? It's completely uninteresting. There's nothing interesting. So, the smart, cool people are always going to go where the other guys aren't. So I would say, I saw this interview with Tim Cook, from Apple once, right after Steve Jobs passed. And they said, what kind of guy are you? And he goes, well, I realized one thing in life. Yes, I realized that in life, if you do what everybody else is doing, that doesn't usually lead to really good outcomes. You really have to sort of think like for yourself and just swim against the tide or go against the grain. And I think he's right. Like, if everybody's telling you to go buy real estate, do the opposite. Do exactly the opposite. That's probably a really good general rule,
I 100% agree.
If everybody's saying start a company, don't start a company. If everybody's saying get a serious job, then don't get a serious. Like the crowd is always wrong, the crowd's always doing the exact wrong thing, I think.
Agreed.
And yeah, I sort of like in my kind of path through life, I've kind of always just done my own thing, like I didn't, I, I didn't do something because, everybody said this is the right thing to do. Like I wanted to get a PhD in math. People were like, even including my parents were like, why are you doing that? Like, why do you need, I was like, what? I like math. Like, I'd like to do some more complex math. And I'm like, like people are like, well, what are you gonna do with that? And I was like, I have no idea. I don't care. I like it. I like math. So now, of course, when I was a completely starving Stanford graduate student, and like my friends were getting jobs at Booz Allen Hamilton and, as consultants making absurdly high salaries of $100,000 a year back then. And I was like, just eating ramen and solving equations. Yeah, I looked like I might have been doing the wrong trade, but it eventually worked out, like, so I think that, I think you gotta go against the grain, do what everybody is not doing. That's my advice in general.
No, and yeah, look at the outcomes it's had in your life, 10 plus exits, now early to Bitcoin, incredibly successful entrepreneur and investor. I think that's a good motto to always be thinking about, is go against the crowd and go against what everyone is
Well,
thinking.
Buffett said it too. He sort of said, look, he said, one thing you should do is follow your inner voice. You have some inner voice that tells you something. Actually follow that, Don't do what everybody else is telling you to do, but just try to like, follow your inner voice and just kind of have fun. Like, part of my thing, like with Twitter, people are like, well, how did you get so big on Twitter? I'm like, because I have a lot of fun on Twitter. I really enjoy making these videos and doing stupid stuff and making jokes and making people laugh. I'm a little bit of a
Yeah,
stand-up comedian too, So
you
I think,
are. Yeah.
it's sort of like I said, like the other I put a tweet. I said yesterday, I said, there's two kinds of people in Bitcoin. There's people who check the feed every minute, and then there are people who pretend that they don't care and they check their feed in secret every minute. It's like, oh yeah. I'm like that. I'm checking every. And so like,
So
I'm
true.
both. No, it's like
Yeah.
I only check every minute in bull markets, like checking in the bear markets. And
Yeah.
to me, that's the fun thing about this community is like we're all in this together in a way, and we're all in it separately, but we're all kind of living through the same thing. We all have the same emotions. We have the exactly same, fears. Um, everybody says, one Bitcoin, one Bitcoin. And really, really, you say that, but when the market's down, you don't say that anymore, right? So
The potential Bitcoin strategic reserve. I don't know if were you able to watch Eric Trump's speech at Bitcoin Abu
I watched
Dhabi?
part of it. Part
Okay.
of it. I didn't watch the whole thing. It's on my list. Yeah.
What do you think are the odds that, and I know on, I think Polymarket, they have 30% odds that he introduces it in the first 100 days. I think if that's accurate and it is a 30% chance, the market is way underestimating this potential huge catalyst if Bitcoin does this strategic reserve. Do you think it's going to happen, or do you think it's a long shot? What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know. I think it's probably going to happen. I would say, the real question is, does Trump want to fight that battle really hard? He's got a bunch of other battles that he wants to do, I think, it's not like at the absolute top of his agenda, in my opinion. Like, I think the immigration thing is going to be more top of immigration, that's probably the number one. I think he's got to deal with Ukraine. So I wouldn't say it's an afterthought, but I don't think it's like not a priority. I think what we've got here is a very pro crypto administration, though. I think we're going to see a gradual end to this Operation Choke Point. I think we're going to have, this new guy they got in the SEC is going to completely change this decriminalization of all this stuff. So I think, look, I think the way to, if you're thinking, oh, we're going to get this thing and we're going to have a spike up, that sort of I would temper your expectations a little bit. Like, I think we're going to have a very good year next year, but I don't think we're going to have this thing where you should leverage and try to bet for like some big, moment. Like I think we have all good things, but yeah, the Bitcoin reserve might not happen the first 100 days. If it doesn't, then it'll hurt me. It doesn't, like I do think he'll do at a minimum. I think he'll say like, those Silk Road Bitcoin things that we have, we're going to put them in the reserve. I think that we could get, for them to start going on a massive buying spree. I think they need to kind of get within 100 days. That seems a little aggressive to me, like they're going to start spending money on Bitcoin. Like, the MSNBC is going to go completely insane if they do it.
Very true.
Can
Very
you believe them? Like, what, we're spending money on Bitcoin?
yeah, true.
Like,
They'll have a
the
complete
idea of
meltdown.
spending money on Bitcoin is making them nuts.
Yeah.
Imagine that they said, we've just spent $1 billion on Bitcoin. Like, people are going to be like, you did what?
True.
People are they're going to be like protests in American cities, like, no on Bitcoin, no on Bitcoin, no more Bitcoin,
Yeah, there would be meltdowns,
like,
100%.
feed our people, no more Bitcoin. Stop Fred Krueger,
You'll be enemy number one.
Oh yeah, I mean, they'll be like, Krueger, he's just trying to sell his bags to us. Like, I know. You know what? They'll probably invite me on. Like, Mr. Krueger, you're here. You're promoting this nonsensical program. You just want to sell your bags to us, right? What you do, right?
True.
That's what they're gonna do. Yeah. I don't know. I'll with that.
If it does happen, do you think it would be a massive thing? Do you think it would be like if the US is, okay, Bitcoin's a strategic reserve asset, we're going to do the Cynthia Lummis bill, we're going to buy up 5% over the next 5 years. Do you think Bitcoin would double overnight on that news? Like, is it as big as I am imagining it in my head?
I think if they say that, yeah, they could do it overnight.
Okay.
I actually do. I mean, honestly, if they pass that bill, right, where they say we're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin price doubles overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, one of the guys on one of my spaces, this guy, Zach Resnick, he's actually working on part of the actual legislation. He's a lawyer. And he's like, he goes, Fred, this thing goes through. He goes, it's kind of like, it's like a nuclear bomb. It's sort of like, I go, so does it break the power law? He goes, yeah, it goes to 500,000 immediately, Fred. Like, that's it. Like, we're done. It's like, it breaks all models. So he's a smart guy, that guy's Zach. He is one smart guy. But, I don't know for sure. But I think, look, there's a lot of things like that could happen. Another one is like no capital gains on Bitcoin. True. Like there's definitely I'm not saying it's a non-zero possibility to say there will not be any capital gains on Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, there's multiple events that could happen in 25. The Middle East could announce that they're doing one of their sovereign wealth funds has allocated.
Or we have several of these events happening at the same time because
yeah,
these events are not independent, right?
That's true. That is very true.
You have the U.S. does a strategic reserve, while the Middle East will quadruple their strategic reserve, and Russia will do theirs, and like these things are all. It's like it's all an interconnected thing. And it promises to be. On the other hand, if we don't get a strategic reserve, there's probably some of that's priced into the market, and some people will view it in the most negative possible way, and they'll be like, "See, I told you, we didn't get a strategic reserve. You got to sell that thing." And it's the Joe Carlosalis of the world, who claim that they're Bitcoiners, but who insist on betting people like me that the price is going to go down, So, I don't know. I do think, I think there's going to be a lot of volatility. I think we're going to have a good year, very good year with a lot of volatility. And I think at the end of the next year, it's going to be more clear that you should have been long a lot of Bitcoin in 2024. So, I just love Bitcoin. I think it's just, It's like the best thing. I've never been as emphatically in love with an asset as I have with Bitcoin. I think but like, I don't think usually assets I want to talk about on Twitter or on YouTube, but
True.
Bitcoin is one of those special things. It's like, it's one of these things where once you discover it and you see how great it is, you really think that it could really change the world, and it could make you immensely wealthy as a byproduct.
It is the most entertaining space by far. When I really got into it in 2020, 2021, there has not been a day that I haven't looked either at the price or just the news surrounding it. And there's nothing else. There's no other topic that like captures my interest
Well, that's what I
besides
tell
Bitcoin.
these people who they're like, Fred, like, I'm doing these spaces like every day. Like, how could you possibly, what is there possibly to say about Bitcoin? Like, I go 2 hours a day. Like, we were in this office, and this is my friend Ben over here.
I bet.
We had, we did some work in this office, and we had, Elizabeth Starr from Lightning Labs, right? The founder of Lightning Labs. She's like, I love these spaces, Fred. Like, but like, how long you doing this? Once a week? And I go, no, every day, Elizabeth. She's like, how could you talk about Bitcoin every day for 2 hours ago? I say, that's just me. But they keep on.
And then she's like, I want to produce an entire week. I want to do the guests for a whole week, maybe a month.
Yeah. She's like, I love these spaces. They're great. Like, how come you don't have this person and that person, this other dev on it? I'm like, well, let's get them on, like, but I
Yeah.
mean, I think a lot of people don't realize, especially if you're coming from the hardcore dev world, you don't have these meetings. We're not, we're not hardcore devs,
No.
we're just going fanatics,
Yeah.
that's all.
And there's,
But we love that stuff, and we enjoy talking about it and spreading the word and watching our Twitter account and YouTube counts grow. It's great.
100% it is. And there's always, we do a daily newsletter and people ask me, it's like, how can you write a 1,000+ word newsletter on it every day? And it's like, there's something every single day happening. There's something to cover. There's an event, and it genuinely is every single day something new has covered. That leads into one of my last questions for you. With Bitcoin hitting 100,000, we're getting a huge amount of new readers every day. And the most common email we get back and the most common question we get back is that it used to be a big thing about accumulating one whole Bitcoin. And everyone that is joining Bitcoin in 2024, they think they're too late. They're never going to be able to get one Bitcoin. Now the new goal is to get to 0.1 Bitcoin. What would your response be to people who think they've missed the boat? They're first getting into they've seen it hit $100,000. They're learning about Bitcoin. Their goal is to now is 0.1 Bitcoin at this point even a worthwhile thing for someone to aspire to get to?
They can get to 1 Bitcoin. What's wrong with 1?
Well, some people, they think it's too far. They think it's too much to get to $100,000.
Look, the average house in Australia, for your information, is now selling for 10 Bitcoin. Okay.
True.
Most people, so like, they're sitting there going, 10 Bitcoin, I can buy a house for that. But 1 Bitcoin to hold, too much. Makes no sense. Okay. Until we're up at $1 million per Bitcoin, they should have the idea of owning 1 Bitcoin. That's what they should do. Right. You need to if you don't set your sights at getting 1 Bitcoin, then you're like, you have to get to 1. Like right now, that's the goal. You have to get to 1 Bitcoin. I think, and you should really claw, work. I don't know what you have to do to get to 1 Bitcoin, but you should figure out whatever it takes to get to 1 Bitcoin. Do whatever it takes. Sell a kidney. Okay. Sell a kidney. I am not kidding. Sell a kidney. You have an extra one. Sell one of your kidneys. You might be able to get a Bitcoin for it. I'm not sure what the market is, but I don't know, but like, do something, but get a Bitcoin, like, this is like a major opportunity, like, especially young people. They don't realize how lucky they are right now. Like, I didn't have Bitcoin when I was your age. Like, it's great to have this opportunity to get big. Like, just make it a priority. Like, the problem is people don't take it seriously. They're just spending all their time watching Netflix. Like, stop watching Netflix, put the Netflix down, get a second job, stop watching real estate porn on, Zillow and looking at, this kind of crap and looking at some kind of, crappy house in Australia that you want to buy. No, just buy some Bitcoin and chill. Like, rent a studio somewhere, cheapest thing you can find, and sleep on a mattress. That's it. Like, that's that's the right play, right? Stop with the creature comforts and like the social stuff. Don't need it. You will thank me later. And your one Bitcoin might be worth $1 million in 10 years. Like, great. It's great. That's how you become a millionaire, It's still within reach. It's within reach of most of the people. I mean, maybe not if you're like in, I don't know, some of your readers might be in Uganda or I don't know, someplace like that, right? Maybe not. Maybe one Bitcoin is a little bit much for them, right? But like anybody who's listening to you in Australia or America, like people spend a Bitcoin on a car, like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know. It's achievable. You just have to really prioritize it. I think you all can get to one Bitcoin. You have no excuse. It's like the Alex Baldwin said in Glenn Ross, your excuses are your own, pal. If you don't get to one Bitcoin. So I'll just send.
That is fantastic. Fred, thank you for everything. One final question, and we ended it on it last time, and I end all interviews on it. I asked it was not really Bitcoin related, your entrepreneurial and advice for success. Last time in our first interview, your answer was to focus on AI, but save in Bitcoin and put all of your savings into Bitcoin. Can you give me another kernel of wisdom or a entrepreneurial tip or a general tip for success in life? Because you've been able to have these huge outcomes and you've had so much success throughout your life. Could you give us one final tip to finish it?
I mean, I think my tip is more prediction. Machines are going to rule the world. You're not that important, right? Like 20 years from now, we're likely to just be our utility might be playing Frisbee, right? That's where we are. So we've got a limited shelf life. Our species has a limited shelf life, okay? By the end of your life, you are going to be completely and utterly useless. That's my prediction. So, you might want to really seriously get ahead of it with AI so that you should again, quadruple down on your AI. You should learn to interact with AI. Whatever you do, you should be like massively using AI for whatever you're about to do. And I think it's probably going to be the case that AI will replace everything in the world. So, most of the people they're just like Bitcoin. They're going to miss it because they're just watching Netflix, right? So stop watching Netflix. Stop with the YouTube and the TikTok. Useless, okay? The only thing you need to if you want to learn how to do something, learn how to make the computer do it for you, the AI. So let AI figure out AI, figure out how to get that, spend all your time on that, and then and save all your money in Bitcoin. That's it. That's what you should do. And what worked for me is not going to work for you. What worked for me is starting companies and the entrepreneurial thing, or yeah, that's not for this generation. This generation does not need starting a company. You should not even like the whole idea of like starting a company, getting to venture capital, as all that stuff. That's like let's be like, I'm really successful in the horse and buggy business. They've invented the automobile now. Like my expertise is no longer useful. Like the new world is AI and cryptocurrencies. And I would say that, everything should be those two things are the main thing, is the interaction of cryptocurrencies and specifically Bitcoin, but all the transport layers and stuff around Bitcoin. You mentioned one, Polymarket, very good example, right, of something that's totally taking off, right? But it's not Bitcoin, but it's Polymarket. You could do it on Bitcoin, essentially. Like, it's fine, it works, it's great. But you have cryptocurrency, digital assets, I would say, and AI. Those are the two things where you spend all your time on those two, and a little less time on learning how to make tacos, or renting out apartments in Manly Beach, or whatever your parents and your friends think is the right move, because that's not the right move. That like, the people making tacos will be some robot, made by Tesla. The Optimus will be making your tacos, and the apartments are going to be mass produced by they're going to be printed by 3D printing, and they'll just be stacked on top of each other. Like, we got to get rid of all this crap. Things are going to change dramatically in the next 20 years, and you should ride the wave and be ahead of the change. Don't repeat some existing playbook.
Amazing. Fantastic answer. I think that's I think the last two answers you just gave are my two favorite answers of any interview I've ever done. So thank you for that, Fred. Thank you for giving us so much of your time. And that was fantastic. We'll end it there.
Okay, Jamie.